The indie gaming scene is vast and can even be intimidating at times. With so many games being released on a daily basis, it's an inevitability that at least a few amazing games will slip through the cracks. Here are 10 hidden indie gems that nobody played. Real quick, don't let I Dream of Indie Games get lost in the echo chamber sea of gaming coverage. Head over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames to gain Discord access and more. Like and subscribe to this video, and check out our live streams every Thursday here and at twitch.tv/idreamofindiegames. Your new indie gaming community is waiting for you. First on our list is an excellent title that unfortunately never seemed to find an audience. Lithium City comes from Nico Tuosan. This excellent isometric action game has great style and is soaked in neon, which makes it beautiful to gaze upon. Lithium City doesn't focus so much on narrative, but makes up for that shortcoming through high-octane action. Controls are very simple, with attacks being controlled via the right trigger if you're playing on a controller, with dash being activated via the left trigger. The dashing mechanic is important to learn if you hope to survive, and equally important is grabbing weapons off of your fallen foes and using those very weapons against them. While the game doesn't have a ton of weapons, the ones here, such as swords, are a blast to use and can even be tossed at your foes. The simple combat is also entertaining and reminded me a good deal of Hotline Miami, one of my favorite indies. The game features 6 chapters, though do be aware that the last chapter is pretty extreme as far as difficulty goes. With its excellent art, fun gameplay, and awesome sound design, it would be a grave mistake to sleep on Lithium City. Next, I would like to showcase an arcade-style puzzle game. Pushy and Pully in Blockland was released back in 2020 by Resistance Studio to almost no fanfare, and even today seems to have only mustered a meager 34 user reviews on Steam. This is an absolute travesty. I love puzzle arcade games such as Super Puzzle Fighter, Puzzle Bobble, and so yeah, I was immediately drawn into the world of Pushy and Pully in Blockland. This title is very addicting whether you play solo or co-op, and has you on a quest to find your spaceship and get back to Blockland. Certain combinations of boxes pushed together will create devastating effects. You can link together 3 boxes with bomb icons as one example, which will create a massive explosion. There's tons of fun combinations, and the game also has a scoring system with leaderboards to keep you motivated. There are even cool bosses to take down. The pressure is on, too, as puzzles are often timed, with a UFO appearing to wreak havoc should time run out. Hell, there's even a Super Mario World-style overworld map which will hit you right in the retro feels. The game does work better with a co-op partner in my opinion, but is still enjoyable as a single-player experience. It's a colorful, fun, and challenging puzzle game that not nearly enough people played. If you are seeking something a little bit hotter and steamier for this summer, look no further than A Summer's End, Hong Kong 1986, a visual novel filled with romance. The story revolves around Sam and Michelle and their summer fling, or will it be more than a fling? Sam and Michelle are opposites, but you know what they say, opposites attract. The game is quite linear, but there are a few critical choices to be made. If you really want to get saucy, an adult patch is also available which will reveal even more. The game's visuals are outstanding with fantastic art, and it also has sharp writing to keep you engaged. The synthy soundtrack is pretty good too, and even features notable artists from the synthwave scene. The game does a really good job of showing folks what growing up in the 80s was like, and it also does a nice job dealing with some rather heavy-handed topics. All told, A Summer's End, Hong Kong 1986 is a great way to unwind that comes recommended for visual novel fans. Let's get a little crazy with our next selection. Gun Crazy, yet another frantic arcade action romp. Gun Crazy is short but oh so sweet. Your screen will become a pixelated mess as you shoot your way through 4 levels of intense enemy resistance. The biggest knock against Gun Crazy is the fact that it ends far too soon. Controls are very easy to master with basic dodging, shooting, and jumping mechanics. Expect to die and die often as you learn enemy patterns and level layouts. Because of this, I wouldn't recommend Gun Crazy to folks who don't enjoy a bit of difficulty in their games. You also won't get much of a story here, which is kinda disappointing because the visuals and character designs are so damn cool. But in the end, Gun Crazy is so much fun to play with really cool guns, awesome art, and a hard-hitting soundtrack. If you're a fan of the genre and enjoyed retro classics such as Gunstar Heroes, look no further than Gun Crazy. It's available on all major consoles. Thy Sword is an older game now, which was released by Game Phase, but it still makes for a really fun weekend all these years later. Available across across all major platforms, Thy Sword is an arcade action title that can be played either single player or in co-op. You'll clear out rooms of enemies as a barbarian or Valkyrie, gathering crystals to stop an evil overlord, swing your sword in a few different ways, and block attacks carefully as a barbarian, or as a Valkyrie, strike down enemies with a bow. A few characters can also be unlocked along the way, but they won't play all that differently from one another, unfortunately. Thy Sword also has upgrades which need to be earned that will increase your chances of survival. Crows also drop keys that can be used to unlock treasures for more gold. It is a simple game to play and really fun with a second player. You do have to be careful though, because you can attack your partner by accident or on purpose if you want to be a total dick. The game does have a few different modes of play and it can be quite challenging, but is again a bit on the shorter side. While far from perfect, Thy Sword is a fun romp worth exploring. The visuals have a nice 80s look to them and the sound design calls back to that era as well. The game is almost always on sale, so be on the lookout. While Evan's Remains could be described as a puzzle platformer, it also features a very powerful narrative. This makes it feel a bit like a visual novel at certain times throughout gameplay. You play as a young girl on a deserted island who is seeking a boy named Evan. You need to piece the story together for yourself while taking on challenging monoliths. Solving monoliths will start out simple enough, but don't let your guard down. Jumping on the correct platforms at the right moments is crucial, as these puzzles quickly become difficult. Different platforms eventually appear as well, adding even more of a challenge to the game. Advancing forward reveals bits of the story and your purpose for being on the island, which will help to keep you invested throughout the entire duration of the game. The game has very dark themes, surprisingly, so do be aware of that. It's inspired by Japanese graphic adventure games. Evan's Remains is beautiful, tough, mysterious, and ultimately rewarding. It is not a game for everyone, but if you love a compelling narrative experience and like the idea of platforming puzzles, it's short but sweet. The excellent post-rock soundtrack is also worth listening to on its own. Puzzles can be skipped if you're struggling, so there's also accessibility options to this great game. While this next title found at least a bit of an audience when it launched back in 2020, it is not often that I hear Röki brought up in conversations today. The game is based on Scandinavian folklore and features a colorful cast of characters across its bleak, frigid world. You play as Tuve, who is living peacefully with her little brother and father when the family house is suddenly attacked by a giant monster, putting everyone in grave danger. The home is destroyed and her father is lost in the catastrophe, with Tuve also losing track of her brother in the woods. The game is very sad across its 15 hours, with a narrative that might hit home for many of you. It plays very much like a point-and-click adventure, though you do have free movement over your character. Gather items and solve logical and sometimes illogical puzzles. You may need to combine certain items depending on the puzzle, which is fairly easy to pull off. Players can highlight areas of interest, which helps to keep the narrative moving at a decent pace. The truth is though, if you weren't a fan of point-and-click adventures before, Röki won't change your mind. But that said, fans of the genre should check it out, as it features some great writing and themes alongside memorable characters. The art is also jaw-dropping and the sound design excellent. It's not perfect and some of the puzzles can be frustrating, but those that persevere will be rewarded in the end. A haunting little adventure is next, with an art style that still resonates with me all these years later. INMOST is an excellent cinematic puzzle platformer that was released by Hidden Layer Games and Chucklefish. I would say of all the games on this list, INMOST is perhaps the most well known, but I did want to include it because it's so very special, and if you missed it, well now here's your chance. INMOST is a cinematic narrative-driven puzzle platformer at its core. The game is extremely bleak and dark, like many games on this list. I guess that says something about me. The story will bounce between 3 different characters: a knight, a child, and a wanderer. Each character deals with inner conflicts and are somehow connected to one another. The gameplay is similar to Another World or other cinematic platformers, though not nearly as difficult as some of the games within this genre tend to be. There are a few puzzles to solve as well, but nothing too taxing on the brain. The game has lots of collectibles too, but they are optional. The story is absolutely chilling though, and the real star of the show. It's a fascinating world to explore. I consider INMOST an indie classic that just doesn't get the recognition it deserves, and it goes on sale often, so really, you gotta add this one. Here is a game that I always felt was greatly mistreated because of what it wasn't, not what it is. Yes, Foregone is clearly inspired by Dead Cells, but that doesn't make it a bad game. I think another thing that hurt Foregone out of the gate was the fact that it launched as an Epic Game Store exclusive. This really limited the audience interest. By the time Foregone had launched everywhere, it seems like people moved on. I guess that was kind of a foregone conclusion. Ha 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 ha. Regardless, Foregone is a really well-made game taking place in the city of Caligan, which is facing an invasion. The invaders are after cutting-edge technology, which is being stashed away in the city. Super soldiers known as Arbiters are created to fight off this new looming threat. Combat and exploration are excellent in Foregone. The game has tons of weapons to gather and upgrade, and they all feel unique from the last. Mixing things up even further are guns that can be used against your foes. Foregone has a pretty robust skill tree as well, making the game very customizable. It feels balanced too, not being overly frustrating. A beautiful title in motion, feels great, sounds great, and will go down as a truly underappreciated hidden gem. We now turn our attention to a cute platformer. Sydney Hunter and the Curse of the Mayan is a wonderful indie release that's available on all major platforms. It is a game that's perfect for you retro fans out there. You play as Sydney, who gets caught in a pyramid scheme of sorts. Sadly for him, this pyramid is very dangerous. A deity destroys the Mayan calendar, spreading it across the land through temples and statues. Sydney now needs to collect the calendar pieces and save the day. The gameplay is straightforward with basic jumping, a whip attack, a boomerang, and even some underwater options. The temples are tricky, and you'll need to discover keys and crystal skulls to progress. Boss fights are intense and challenging like much of the game, and upgrades are available too. Remember those underwater sections I mentioned though? Well, they're also kind of the most annoying part of the game because you have to use your spear in the water, and that stinks. Other than that though, this is a great looking classic 8-bit pixel art style that they've used, and the game also has a wonderful, equally retro soundtrack. I recommend this title for those of you that love NES era gameplay. We hope you found the next indie game of your dreams on this list, and thank you for supporting independent content here at I Dream of Indie Games.